Dear students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. M. P. Stija, retired from the Department of Library and Information Science, Guru Nanak Dev University. We are going to study the kinds of subjects in different classification systems. You must understand that knowledge is a very big mass of ideas and subjects. If you want to study it as a whole, it cannot be done. We can study it by breaking into some convenient parts, smaller parts, to specialize it. In the days of specialization, we study subjects, not the area of knowledge as a whole. So, when the specialization emerge, new and new subjects emerge. Moreover, a subject has been defined as a coherent area of knowledge which falls within the comprehension of a normal person. That the number of subjects always goes on changing, and the area of subjects, their number, their boundaries are always in a flux. Basic subjects. Basic subject is a subject without any isolate idea. A main class is also a basic subject. It is a broad assumption into which all the modern library classifications are divided. It is assumed that a main class represents an accepted broad field of broader specialization which provides a context to a subject. It is a coherent field of specialization. These basic subjects are postulated by a priori, by the classification system or by the classificationist. Their number is limited by many social and academic factors and may be contained by the notation used. The basic subjects are mostly social in nature. Their number and boundaries vary from time to time. Kinds of basic subjects. Ranganathan has further divided basic subjects into 10 kinds as shown in the following figures divided into two. Basic subjects have two kinds, primary basic subjects and non-primary basic subjects. Among the primary subjects are newly merging subjects, traditional subjects, fused subjects, distilled subjects, agglomerates, and subject bundles. And among the non-primaries are canonical classes, systems, specials, and environmental basic subjects. Compound subjects. These subjects are composed of a basic class and one or more isolates. The enumerative classification systems such as the DDC or the Library of Congress mostly enumerate compound subjects and provide ready-made numbers. Their number is infinite in the universe of knowledge. In a faceted classification, these are constructed by the classifier. A compound subject comprises of a basic subject and facets range in some more or less systematic order. Complex subjects. A subject may have hockey from two or main classes, a sort of mixed main class. A complex class is defined as a class comprising of two or more phases taken from different main classes. Interaction of two distinct subjects is called phase relation. These phases are locked in some interrelation, but it's not easy to anticipate all the possible relations between two subjects. Obviously, such subjects are interdisciplinary in nature, formed by loose assemblage. It is a very efficient device to cope with the turbulent outturn of interdisciplinary and in-depth subjects. Phenomena of phase relation has been implicit in all the modern library classification schemes. Provision has been made for it to a certain extent in all the library classifications. Ranganathan gave the problem a serious consideration and introduced the term phase for it. He isolated a number of different kinds of phases, which are 6 in number. Though Ranganathan is not the first to provide class number for such interrelation of two different subjects, UDC and LCC did earlier, but certainly CC is one of the schemes which handles such subjects with mathematical precision. Facets versus phases. It is important to differentiate between facets and phases. Facets are layers of which a subject is made of. These are inborn constituents of a compound subject and are hard to set apart. They make a compound subject. Identification of different facets in a compound subject is a process of facet analysis. Phases of a subject are loosely assembled and are in incidental relation which can be easily set apart as they form distinct portion of a complex subject. A complex subject requires phase analysis, and further each of the phase may require facet analysis. Kinds of relation between phases. At the first instance, in the 6th edition of CC, Ranganathan recognizes 5 kinds of relations or interrelations between the involved phases. In the 7th edition, one more relation, that is tool phase, has been rather introduced to make them 6. General relation. It is an unspecified relation comprehending all other relations not included in any of the following 5 relations. This sort of relation is vague and undefined. For example, relation of political science with history, relation between algebra and geometry. Bias relation. When the exposition of a phase is favorable or is inclined towards another phase, it is deemed as a bias relation. The biased subject is specifically attuned to the needs of a specified group, especially a specialist, or examples selected are of use to that group. It is a form of presentation. For example, mathematics for biologists uses examples calculated to interest a biologist and leaves out much mathematics of no use to that group. Psychology for doctors or physics for civil engineers are the examples of bias phase relation. Bias should be toward a specialist group. Gardening for handicaps or hockey for teenagers are not bias subjects. Comparison relation. When the involved phases are compared with one another, then it is called a comparison relation. Ranganathan states that such a relation is comprehensive or non-descriptive. For example, ACR1 compared with ACR2. Comparative study of Indian and British constitutions is another example of comparative phase relation. Difference relation. As the name implies, this type of relation involves the exposition of the difference between the two involved phases. For example, difference between the Indian constitution and the British constitution, difference between Hindu and Jain religions. This type of relation is rather redundant or can be treated as a simple corollary of comparison relation. Tool relation. A subject may be used as a tool to study the exposition of other subjects. Then sub-subjects are called tool phase. It is a method to investigate the original subject by using another subject as a methodology. For example, mathematical economics, philosophy of science or sociology of science are 2 such subjects, where philosophy and sociology respectively have been used to study science. Mathematics is often used to study or describe other subjects, for example, mathematical geography. Influencing phase relation. When the phases are so involved that one is influencing the exposition of the other, it is termed as the influencing relation. This phase relation is very prominent and frequent in research. For example, the influence of British Constitution on Indian Constitution or the impact of IT on library services. Levels of relations. To make class numbers brief and precise, Ranganathan has differentiated each of the 6 relations into 3 levels, namely whether they occur at the level of the main class, facets, or isolates. Phase relations. 2 foci involved in some relations belong to 2 different main classes. It is termed as phase relation. For example, difference between mysticism and religion, a difference phase relation. Law for social workers or science and religion. Intrafacet relations. When the 2 parts belong to one and the same main class, same category, but to 2 different arrays, it is termed as intrafacet relation. For example, difference between Jew and Muslim religions. Here both the Jew and Muslim religions belong to the personality facet of the main class Q religion, but their arrays are different. Similarly, let us take the example of the title, Influence of Transport on Trade. Both transport and trade belong to the energy facet of X economics, but belong to different arrays. They are again of 6 kinds, ranging from general to influencing relations. Some more examples are a comparative study of Indian and British laws. Intra-array relations. S. R. Ranganathan has carried the division one step further by inventing what he calls intra-array relations. In this case, the 2 foci not only belong to the same facet or the same main class, but also to the same array of that particular facet. In other words, it is a relation between 2 equally ranked isolates whose immediate parents are the same. For example, relation between the first and the second house of the Indian Parliament. Here both the first and second houses belong to the same facet personality, that is the same array 3 in P2 in V history. Thus, it is a case of intra-array general relations. Another example is difference between education of male and female students. These intra-array relations are again of 6 kinds like other levels of relations ranging from general to influencing relations. Thus, in all there are 6 into 3, that is 18 kinds of relations. Phase analysis. Having analyzed the kind and level of relations of two phases, it is not difficult to construct the class number for complex subjects. But prior to this, precedence of one phase over the other must be determined. Since the CC is a very standardized scheme, so the determination of the first and the second phases, called primary and secondary phases respectively, is vital. Raghunathan has formulated rigid but easy and unambiguous rules for this purpose. Symmetrical relations. General, comparison and difference relations at any level are symmetrical relations. Any of the two could be the primary phase. For standardization, Raghunathan prescribes that the primary phase is one which is of less ordinal value, that is which occurs first in the schedules. Accordingly, the phase with higher ordinal value becomes the second phase. For example, relation between chemistry and physics, C physics forms the primary phase and E chemistry forms the secondary phase. Let us take another example, difference between drama and fiction. Here drama is the primary phase and fiction forms the secondary phase. BC2 prescribes the reversal of the phases for entry in a classified catalog. Asymmetrical relations. In case of bias, influencing and tool phases, determination of the first phase is bit different and not as mechanical as the relation is asymmetrical. In these cases, secondary phase qualifies the first. For example, in case of bias relation, the bias phase is discriminating or favoring phase forms the primary phase. To put it in other words, we can call it the donor or the active phase. Accordingly, the favored phase becomes the secondary phase. For example, in mathematics for engineers, mathematics is a biased phase which is favoring or the donor, so it is primary phase, and therefore engineering is a secondary phase. In both the cases, primary phase constitutes the primary theme, whereas the secondary phase gives the phase relation its distinctive name. Some comments. One may object to keeping book Mathematics for Engineers among the mathematics books when it is specially written for engineers. Obviously, such a book will be more useful when placed with engineering books. Does it violate the wise axiom, place a book where it is likely to be used most? Since the CC is not a reader-oriented scheme but strictly a discipline-based classification scheme, so a subject must file with its own class irrespective of its prospective readership consideration. Logic for such a rule is very simple. Mathematics, whether it is for engineers, biologists or psychologists, remains mathematics per se, so it must go to the mathematics section, hence the primary phase. Influencing relation. While in case of influencing relation, the above rule seems reversed. Here the influenced phase forms the primary phase and the influencing phase becomes the secondary phase. Here the receiver is the first phase. For example, take the subject influence of Bhagavad Gita on Hindi literature. Here Hindi literature is the influenced phase, so it will form the first phase, and the Bhagavad Gita is the second phase as it is the influencing phase. Again, in the subject influence of calculus on physics, physics is the first phase and calculus is the second phase. Rationale behind such decision is very simple. In the above example, Hindi literature and physics are respectively the subject proper, and Bhagavad Gita and calculus are simply affecting the exposition, hence the rule. Tool phase. In such a relation, the subject which acts as a tool is the secondary phase, while the subject studied is the primary phase. In mathematical biology, biology is the first phase, whereas in sociology of town planning is the first phase. Kinds of subjects or basic subjects. In library classification, the universe of knowledge has been organized in many layers, starting from disciplines going down to elemental and individual concepts like isolates or standards of divisions. In between, there are main classes, canonical classes, categories, facets. These are all composed of subjects. A subject provides context and focus to a topic or some area of knowledge or some isolated idea. In calling classification, for the first time, All kinds of subjects have been divided into three kinds, namely basic subjects, compound subjects, and complex subjects. And these have been taken from the analogy of chemistry. The basic subjects are just like chemical elements, just like oxygen, nitrogen, gold, copper, and so on. Then our complex subjects are just like mixtures of two or more elements which can be separated. In between, the compound subjects are just like salts which are made permanently uh, by two or more elements by some irreversible chemical action. Therefore, Ranganathan has made the study of subjects more easy and comprehensible by dividing them into various kinds. As told you earlier, a complex subject is also known as two-phase subjects, that it involves relation between two subjects at different levels. Ranganathan, in the beginning, identified 5 types of relations between two subjects. It started with general phase relation, bias phase relation, influencing phase relation, comparison phase relation, and different phase relation. And of late, in the 7th edition, he also postulated a new phase that is known as tool phase relation. Example of these relations are, for example, in general phase relation, the relation is undefined. For example, say relation between language and literature. In bias phase relation, a subject is one is favoring the other, means they are not at the equal level. One is a donor, another is a receiver. For example, method for engineers. Then influence phase relation is that if one subject is influenced by the other, it's known as influencing phase relation. Impact of computers on research libraries. So here the computers are impacting or influencing the libraries, procedures and methods. Then comparison phase relation is also some sort of a relation which compares the two phases or two subjects. Geography as compared with geology, or algebra as compared with chemistry, algebra as compared with geometry. Then difference phase relation is also sort of comparison relation, and let us say which brings out the difference between two subjects, difference between history and political science. And lastly, in the tool phase relation, it is when a subject is used as a tool to study this other subject. For example, the study of physics under mathematical rules. So that is a tool phase relation. Here is the application of mathematics to physics. Having said that a complex class comprises of two phases, then let us see how to construct a class number for a complex subject. Ranganathan gave a very precise and mathematical rules for determining or making class number for these subjects, and also determining which is the first phase and which is the second phase. The rule is that first determine the first phase, then the second phase, then use 0 as the connecting symbol, and also the digit to prescribe the kind of the relation between the two. Then you can get the class numbers. To tell you step by step, put the first phase first, then a 0 as a connecting symbol, and a Roman digit taken from chapter 6 of the schedules, pages 2.28, followed by the notation for the second phase. Phase relation digits are so designed to keep complex subject classes ahead of the regular phases. For example, the formula is phase 1 plus 0 and any digit from A to Y, then phase 2. If there are common digits between phase 1 and phase 2, then in the phase 2, these digits are removed. Phase relations in the Library of Congress classification. Phase relations within the LC classification are also fairly well handled, obviously only by enumeration. There are examples of bias phase, the influencing phase, and the tool phase listed in the schedules. All these are usually covered in the LC classification by the often ambiguous heading general special, and this refers to special aspects of a general subject. For example, socialism and art, socialism and religion, socialism and women have been given their enumerated numbers. And take another example, relations of epigraphy to archaeology or relation of epigraphy to religion have also their separate number enumerated in the LC schedules. Phase relations in the Dewey Decimal Classification. In the 17th edition, it provided some guidance for placing such subjects. Class an analytical work dealing with Shakespeare's influence on Keats with Keats. There is no provision to connect the numbers for Keats and Shakespeare or his influence in the class number suggested in this manner. Being an enumerative system, throughout its history it has here and there identified such complex subjects and given ready-made numbers for them. For example, science and religion, role of Christianity church in society, Christianity and scientific disciplines, law and ethics, law and society, etc. have their ready-made numbers given in the DDC. Phase relation in the DDC. To continue, types of various relations have not been isolated except the bias phase relation added since the 18th edition, 1971, and through the standard subdivision 0 to 4. The standard subdivision 0 to 4 denotes works for specific types of users. For example, Method for Engineers has ready-made number 510.2462. Another standard subdivision 0 and 5 stands for application of various scientific principles. For example, Statistical Principles of Library Classification has a ready-made number with the standard subdivision 015. Phase relation in the UDC. In this scheme, colon is used to indicate phase relation. However, UDC does not distinguish between the different kinds of levels of phase relations. It may be added that colon is also used to represent a phase relation. For example, general relation between physics and chemistry has the number 53:45. Method for Engineer will get the number 52:62. Comparison of Fabian and National Socialism has also got number used with colon. Similarly, influence of Hinduism on Buddhism gets the number 294.3:29.51. And influence of geography on history has number 93:91. Phase relation in the second edition of bibliographic classification, that is BC2. A most advanced treatment of phase relation can now be found in the second edition of the BC classification by J. Mills. The digit 9 has been reserved for synthesis of multi-phase subjects. It recognizes 7 types of phase relation denoted by 9C to 9K, whereas bias phase is isolated at 3C. Important among them are 9C comparison relation, 9E tool relation, 9H general relation, 9J influence relation. For example, crime and psychology has got the number Q09HI. Continuing with the phase relation in BC2, it also allows the reversal of phases. Influence of psychology and French literature may get the number XS9H1. Comparison between political and philosophical thinking is R9CAA or AA9CR. Influence of mythology or Christianity also may have 2 numbers like this. So, in this way, in a classified catalog code, we can have 2 access points instead of 1 for a phase relation subject. To summarize, in the universe of knowledge, there are 3 kinds of subjects: basic, compound, and complex. The complex subjects, which are interdisciplinary in nature, are formed by loose assemblage mode of formation of subjects. There are 2 or multi-phase subjects. Complex subjects have interacting foci from 2 or more basic or compound subjects. The phenomenon of phase relation has been implicit in all the modern library classification systems. Their improvement has been made for the first time into certain extent by classifying such subjects. The Library of Congress classification enumerates such subjects based on their availability in the Library of Congress. It thus provides class numbers for such subjects as socialism and women. The UDC did recognize such relations, yet never isolated the types of relations between the 2 subjects. Its symbol colon for relation and coordination, though very flexible, is totally non-specific. The DDC introduced the concept of multi-phase subjects bit late in life. In its 14th edition, it had notation 001 in relation to be divided from the whole schedule For example, the long number stands for office organization and business productivity. Also, it provided number for English history in English fiction, a long number. But later, this clumsy notation was withdrawn in favor of instruction to classify such subjects here and there. Since the 18th edition, there is a very sound provision for Bayes phase relation in the standard subdivision 0 to 4. However, these schemes have not provided a satisfactory method of classifying complex subjects, as the phases were not really understood at that time of their origin. Late attempts to make provisions are only haphazard, even vague or clumsy. No wonder then multi-phase themes are out of place in the journal to specific order. S. R. Ranganathan gave the problem a serious study and coined the term phase for distinct components of what he calls complex class. He empirically isolated 6 kinds of phase relations which can occur at 3 levels, namely main classes, facets, and arrays. He further coined the concept of phase relation and phase analysis, which is considered another important contribution to classification. Next to facet analysis, BC2, revised by J. Mills since 1977, is another scheme which has given a very systematic treatment by identifying 7 kinds of phase relations denoted by 9C to 9K. It has gone a step further to make the treatment of such subjects systematic and modern. Nevertheless, in most of the schemes, the methods have been intuitive. In the schemes like LCC, DDC, and UDC, methods to classify interdisciplinary subjects are haphazard and are some imposition on the structure than to be any organic development. However, it is not easy to anticipate all the possible relations which a subject may take with other subjects. The only way is to isolate such relations empirically as they emerge in published literature from time to time, that it should be based upon literary warrant. But the methods to accommodate such different kinds of relations between subjects should be inherent in the structure of the scheme.